My name is John Waid, and I'm a consultant, a CEO, and leader of C3, Corporate Culture Consulting. We help you in training and coaching to get better as a company by working on your values and your behaviors so that you become the best in the industry. Today's episode is going to cover the vulture of culture that's circling above your business right now as we speak. And it's going to come down and eat your lunch. So if you don't want to become the next Boeing, make sure you stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? There are many words thrown around, words that become trendy, but often lack real substance. Words like authentic leadership, or another one that's up for massive misinterpretation is culture. Moreover, culture-driven organization. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean to have a culture-driven organization? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I am the Dragonist, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. To find out more, you can go to dovbaron.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you by Magcast. Imagine having your own industry magazine. What would that do for your authority? Whether you're a coach, a content expert, or an emerging brand, it's hard to stand out from the crowd. So what if there was a proven way to increase both your perceived authority and your professional status in the eyes of your market and get to do it all at once? Well, this is the way for you to go from invisible to being able to get meetings with anyone. Find out more by going to magcast.co. That's magcast.co, where first-time publishers create thriving magazine businesses. Now remember that you can also chat about this episode or any past episodes on our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Simply look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast in those places. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And if you're a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show over time. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Is your corporate culture solid? It's an important question. If so, how do you know? Is there a vulture circling over your culture, ready to pick away at it? Culture-driven organization, what does that actually mean? Well, you're about to find out, and how to do it, because our guest on this episode is John Waid. John is a frontliner. He has a passion for frontline employees who are, at the end of the day, the main responsibility of leaders. He has worked his way up from the front line, starting as a route salesperson for Frito-Lay, and never disconnected from them, as he now owns his own leadership and sales behavior training and consulting business. He believes that leaders need to focus on employees, coaches, and customers, and managing their bottom line. That's who manages the bottom line. So ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else, please put your hands together and help me welcome a fellow tequila aficionado and the superstar, Mr. John Waid. Hey, John.
Hey, how you doing, Dov?
Good to have you on the show, man.
It's great to be here.
Have you had any good tequila lately?
I have. I go to Mexico quite a bit, except for right now. So
yeah, right now you're not going anywhere.
Right.
I found a new one. I found a new tequila.
Which one?
It is called, oh, I just had a brain fart. Oh, I've got cranial flatulence. It is, whoa, Adictivo.
Okay.
You know it?
I don't know that one.
It's such a beautiful añejo tequila. It's an really aged, but it actually is more like a sweet brandy than it is a tequila. Absolutely fantastic.
Right.
So good.
Right.
I know, but for those of you who don't know, John lived in Mexico for many years. We'll get into that in a bit, but he's a fellow tequila aficionado, and I don't get to meet too many of those. So where we always like to start the show, John, is by asking the question, in this world where full of people who claim to be leadership thought leaders and leadership influencers and all those great titles, who is someone that we might not even know or may never have even considered who's been a major influence on you and your leadership, and why?
That's a great question. So in the last 15 years, I've been doing training and coaching around leadership. And I was traveling on Delta a lot because I live in Atlanta, Georgia. So, and Delta's headquartered here. So for me, Delta had a really bad customer service when I first moved to Atlanta. And so much so that I was going on Thanksgiving to Brazil, to Sao Paulo. And I asked the woman at the desk if I could sit up in first class just to take a seat and rest and not eat any food or do anything. And of course I'm the highest level of medallion that they have. And she said, absolutely not. She said, I have to work on Thanksgiving and you're going to sit in the back of the plane.
Wow.
And so fast forward a year or two, and I'm riding on Delta again, and all of a sudden they're starting to say, Mr. Waid, thank you for flying Delta. You're a valued customer, and we really appreciate your business. And then the CEO, a guy named Richard Anderson, came on the safety video. He did an introduction, and he said, at Delta, we have strong values. We have your back. We care about you, and we care about our employees. And he talked a lot about employees. He didn't really talk about the customer and all the safety video introductions that he did. It was always about the employee. Every letter I read that he wrote was about the employees and how good they were and how well they were doing. And I watched an obscure video that he was in at the University of Texas, and he was talking to students, and he's a real down-to-earth, really nice, not a Harvard-educated guy. He went to 2 small schools in Texas. He's an attorney. He worked his way up from the law department in the airlines. He was with Continental, and then he was with Northwest. And he merged the 2 airlines. They were in bankruptcy. They were losing $2 billion, and he brought it back to making billions of dollars. And he did it with one word.
Go ahead.
And that is values. When he was asked what's made Delta so successful, he said one simple word: values. And that's really what culture is all about. So
he took over after you had that interaction with that lovely person on the front desk?
He did.
I'm glad to hear that wasn't after he'd taken over, because that would be somewhat of a contradiction, to say the least.
Right. Well, it took him a few years to get it turned around. The thing is,
I'm sure
that there's 85,000 employees, so you've got to give somebody credit, because a lot of people say you can't change cultures, and he did exactly that.
Yeah. And the airlines are great examples of that. I want to talk about that in a minute. We're talking about I introduced this talking about the vulture of culture. What do you see as this vulture of culture that's circling overhead at any moment that might just eat away at whatever it is we think our culture is?
Right. So the vulture comes down and eats whatever roadkill it finds, right? So recently, the roadkill that's been available has been called Boeing.
Yes.
Yes. That's a roadkill that the vulture came down and ate. Boeing has 7 values. One of them is quality, another one is safety, and another one's integrity. Mm-hmm. And by violating their values, the vulture of culture came down and ate them. They lost billions of dollars. Their market cap has severely been hurt. Our GDP even went down by a couple percentage, tenths of a percent point, because they're the largest exporter. And the CEO said that culture wasn't the culprit of this, and I would argue that it was the culprit. It was the number one culprit, because it was a culture that was pump out planes and make my top and bottom line versus safety, integrity, and quality. So it's real important to guard your culture, because if not, the Vulture culture is real expensive, and you'll come down and eat the filet mignon that you created.
So that is the Boeing created that plane, the
737 Max, right?
Yeah, the Max, right, and that had all those problems.
Right.
They had a ton of orders, and then had to pull them all back, and like you said, that impacted the U.S. GDP. But how do we confront that? Because it's particularly when you have a CEO who says, no, it wasn't a cultural thing. Right. You say, well, it was, because you have safety, you have integrity, you have all these things that are up front in your values, but they say, no, it was an engineering problem.
Right. Well, you can have, every company can have engineering problems or quality problems. The thing is, if there's a value of quality, then you ought to have good quality. You ought to strive for that. If there's a value of integrity, you ought to not lie about it. And if there's safety is your number one quality, which it should be if you build airplanes.
Might be useful.
Then it is the number one responsibility of CEOs, and it's the third or fourth thing they work on, and sometimes the 10th or 11th thing they work on. And it's understandable, because most people work on the tangible money, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Then they work on the customer, right? Because the customer gives them the money, and as a distant third, they think about the employee.
Yeah.
The problem is the employee builds the airplanes, takes care of the customers, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're not a leader paying attention to the front line, to the employee, and you're not working on culture, on your values and your behaviors, then you have more chaos than you have culture. And the Vulture loves chaos.
But you brought up that example earlier, right at the beginning there, when you talked about this frontline worker saying to you, I've got to work on Thanksgiving, so you're going to the back of the bus, right? And that, for me, is definitely a cultural issue.
Right.
But for me, in the work that I do, I would say that is ostensibly a cultural issue. It's a leadership issue, because the leader needs to protect and guard that culture, and by doing that, protect the values. So if you were, when you were at that airline at Delta, and you went to that counter and you were confronted with that, what was your internal response to that?
Well, I mean, without cussing on your show, it was F you, right? And it was your number one. So I got really angry, because at the end of the day, I'm a customer, paid a lot of money to fly on Delta, and I'm very loyal to Delta. And they treated me like dirt, and it was that employee that treated me like dirt, and that employee represents Delta. So by that employee treating me poorly, the representation of Delta and the CEO, whatever work they've done, has gone out the window.
So I'm going to ask you the tough question. Did you do anything about it?
Yes, I wrote a letter to the CEO.
Good. Because I think that this is one of the things, you and I had this discussion previously, before we were recording. And one of the things I talked about was, in the work that I do, oftentimes I'll say, who's the most important person in the company? And people will say the CEO. And I'll say, no, the most important person in the company is the person who picks up the phone. Right. Because immediately, if that person is a douchebag, then the company is a douchebag company. Because people don't say, oh, John picked up the phone and he was douchey, or Susan picked up the phone and she was douchey. They say, I called XYZ company, they're douchey. And so, and that's why I believe with every fiber of my being that we have to vote with our voice and with our dollars, and we actually have to say, I'm not going to purchase your product anymore. And what's more is I've got to use my voice to let you know. Because years ago, a very good friend of mine ran one of the most successful restaurants in Australia. And I worked in the back kitchen with him as a sous chef with him, just for my own enjoyment. I know it's insane, but I did it for enjoyment. And one day we were in there crazy busy. And if you've ever been in a kitchen that's a working kitchen, it's a very high stress environment. And all of a sudden, the maitre d' brought a steak back. And Mike, who was the guy who ran the kitchen, who was my friend, was one of the top 5 chefs in Australia. And when the steak was brought back, I thought he's going to lose his shit. But instead, he turned to the maitre d' and he said, "Thank you. Tell me exactly what's wrong." And the maitre d' did. And at the end of the night, like I said, we were close buddies. And at the end of the night, him and I were walking home and we were chatting. And I said, I was really surprised that you said thank you. And he goes, "Well, I'm not out front, so I don't know what is wrong unless somebody complains." He goes, "I love people who tell me it's great. That's important. But I also love the people who tell me it's bad, because that makes me upgrade the quality of everybody in the kitchen." And I think that that's an example of you writing to the CEO and saying, "I know you think this is your culture, but what it really is very different." And I think that that's a lot of what it is that you're about, is getting and that's why I said at the intro, you're very much about getting people out of the idea of culture versus the practicality of culture. Right. Is that right?
Yeah, and keeping it simple, right? Because we overcomplicate a lot of things, and culture is some values and some behaviors. And the best ones have 3 values, some adjoining behaviors. They keep it simple. They make sure that their values are balanced. So they've got, three values. One's a leadership value, one's a coaching value, I call it, and one's a management value. So one takes care of the aspirational part, which is the leadership part. Then the second one is the growth part. And then the third one is the operational part. So you want to have values that are balanced, because if you have 3 values that are all aspirational, you probably have happy employees and not get anything done.
Right. So walk us through an example. That's great, John. So walk us through an example of that.
Okay.
Because I actually, when we chatted about that originally, I thought, well, that's really great that ideally a company would come down to 3 values, but 1 value for each of these 3 categories. So walk us through an example of that, if you could.
Okay, let's go back to an airline, Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
So Southwest Airlines has 3 values. Everybody knows them and everybody lives them. I've asked the flight attendants, "What are your values?" They can all tell me what they are. And they have 3 unique values. So the first one is warrior spirit. That's their operational value. That's the value that saves money, gets the luggage on the plane quickly, turns airplanes around. That's the warrior spirit.
Right.
Their second one is what I call the customer one, which is servant heart. So they have a servant heart to serve each other first, and then the customer second.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one, so that's their growth value. That's what helps them grow and get better, because their servant heart means they're humble, right?
Yes.
And then the third one is their aspirational value, which is fun loving, and it's spelled FUN-LUVING. The way they spell love at Southwest, LUV.
Right.
Right. So with those 3 balanced values, everybody knowing what they are, everybody living them on a daily basis, they've got, a wonderful airline. And it's generated, it's been the #1 airline in cumulative profits year over year. If you had invested in the late 60s, $10,000, you would have gotten $12 million back.
No, that's not bad. That's not a bad return.
Yeah. It's in a book called Built to Last.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
So there are so many, I don't know, contradictory examples too, because I think I know from the work that I do, if I say, have you done values work, most companies will say yes. However, if I ask the receptionist or the person who's at the front line sales, what are the values of this organization, I would be shocked if they know more than one.
Right.
And even if they know one, they don't really know what it means. Right. Which is also vitally important. It's not just knowing that, it's knowing what it means. So when we come to that, when we come to the integration, how do we get, because like I said, we talk about this culture-driven organization, and that is really about the integration, I believe, anyway, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the integration of those three values. So how do we talk to us about being a culture-driven organization and integrating.
Right. So the culture-driven organizations spend a lot of money on training and development, right? And they're not training and developing you necessarily on technical skills. They're spending a ton of time on people skills. So let me give you an example of two fast food chains in the U.S.
Okay.
One is Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the other one is Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
Okay. And one of them makes $1 million per year per store, and the other one is in 2020 is making $5 million per year per store, and they're closed on Sundays. And the big difference is you can count on the behavior at Chick-fil-A. They're going to say, "It's my pleasure." They're going to smile with teeth. Every kid that works in there knows that they have to do that, and they hire for it. So they hire for the values. They train the behaviors. They hope the kids already have the behaviors. I visited Chick-fil-A, and they said, "John, we hire people that believe what we believe because they're more likely to do what we're going to ask them to do anyway." So, which is a very powerful statement coming from.
Yeah, I mean, right there, I think that's, we can sort of put a pin in that right there, because, I think that oftentimes people are hiring in hopes to train people, and that's fine technically, of course, but behaviorally, there's got to be the foundation of that person. The challenge with that oftentimes though is, and I know because I deal with companies, as do you, is that the person who shows up in the interview is often wearing a mask. And by that, I don't mean for coronavirus.
Right.
They're wearing a mask about what they think you want.
Right.
It's kind of like blind dating. It's like, well, who would you like me to be? And it's not really got much to do with who they are. Right. Even the thief appears honest at an interview. So, guide us a little bit around that part, because, hiring for what's already there, but oftentimes it's difficult for someone in that process to see what's really there.
So I was coaching somebody the other day, and they said, "John, we're hiring." I said, the number one thing that I say in hiring is hire slow and fire fast.
Yep.
Right. If you made a mistake, admit it and move on. So, and the second thing I said to her, we just worked on your values, and they have 3 really cool values too. And one of them is hand in heart. So, and this is a British company. So for them, it's honesty. It's wearing your heart on your sleeve. So I said, "Does this person you want to hire have hand in heart?" Well, they lied on their resume. Okay, well, there you go.
Right.
So you can test for these values in the interviews if you know what they are. The problem is most companies are using the resume to hire versus using the values also to hire.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that this is really a key point that I want our listeners, our viewers to take away, is too often we hire based on that resume. They got an MBA from XYZ or whatever it is, but they don't. So they're looking at, do you fit in here, as in you can wedge it in, versus here's who we are. Let's now pay attention to what you are to see if you belong here, which is vastly different. And oftentimes where I find that a lot of companies fall apart pretty quick. So, if you know those values, as you were just saying, that has to be the hiring place. That has to be the focal point of the hire, is what are we about, and how do you, and so how would you guide somebody to test around that?
Okay.
Right. So,
well, first you have to know what they are.
yeah.
Right. So you have to know your values, and hopefully you don't have 7 or 14 of them, because nobody remembers them. And a lot of them are very generic. So if you can go for those more like Southwest Airlines type of values, hand and heart. We've got hunter spirit also for this company.
Right.
They've got a hunter spirit. They want people out hunting and growing and getting better every day. So you want to know what the values are, and then you want to know what the behaviors are that go with those values. So for instance, at Chick-fil-A, a behavior they're looking for is smiling with teeth. Okay. So it's not just one of these kind of fake smiles, right? It's can you smile with teeth? So when my daughter went to interview with Chick-fil-A, I said, you better smile with teeth. And she's already a natural teeth smiler.
Right.
She got lucky, she got good teeth. So anyway, she smiles nicely. She treats the person very kindly. And they see how you treat everyone. When you come into the store, when you ask for the manager, they're looking at every little detail of your behavior. So, and at Chick-fil-A, you can count on thousands, I mean, tens of thousands of kids saying, it's my pleasure every time you say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can predict it, and I can count it. So culture is an observable behavior. So you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it. It's, and I can go into companies and tell you right away, like you said, with the receptionist, if they've even started to talk about culture.
Yeah. So you just said something again that's really important. It's one thing to know the values. It's another thing to even interview for behaviors that are aligned with the values.
Right.
But the challenge is, as you said just a few minutes ago, is that values are a word that is often generic or subjective.
Right.
So, I really hate it if I go into a company and they say, oh, our value is integrity. My response is, what does that mean? Right? If you are a crook and you steal, you're integral. Right. That's integrity. That's what integrity means. You are aligned with what it is you do.
Yourself, right? I'm a stealer, so I'm being integral to myself.
Right. So, you're in total integrity. So I think that's part, like even in the work that we do, and I know that's what you do too, is how do you help people to really understand that they need to go to that place of eliciting the true meaning of a value? Because it's okay to have integrity as a value, but you have to be able to nail down, here's what that means to us.
Right. Right. And it needs to be unique to you, right? So when I do the work with companies or teams, I interview their best performers, and I get the values from them. I go to the front line, I interview the performers from the front line, and then I tell the leaders, these are your values, because these are the values that your best people are saying are your values. And it's different for every company, and it's different for every group. Like we can do sales, sales cultures, we can do marketing cultures, so that's the small C. And then we also do the big C, which is the company culture. So and it's real important to figure out what that culture is for that particular company and their particular industry. So safety, obviously for an airline, would be, an integral part. So I would say safety soul. You got to have a soul of safety.
Right.
So, and that soul should tell you, hey, that's not a safe airplane. I'm not going to make it. Right.
Right.
And I'm gonna take that straight to the CEO, tell him it's not safe, and I'll get fired for it. I don't care.
Right.
That's when you have values, is when people stand up for them and really care about them.
Yeah, it's something they're invested in.
Right.
Now we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about the difference between leaders and managers, because one of the things you say is that a lot of times companies are being led by managers rather than leaders. So we're going to come right back on that. However, for right now, I wanted to let you know, dear listener, that this episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, which is Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how do we bring people together who have completely different points of view? This is exactly what your mind and your soul have been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some very real and oftentimes intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. These include astronauts, neuroscientists, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, entrepreneurs, entertainers, and some folks who you might even think of as being, well, put it simply, a-holes, until you sit down and listen and you discover that they're truly fascinating people who have a point of view that's well worth listening to. Simply go over to dovebaron.com and you can find out how you can sink your teeth into another episode of Curiosity Bites. Get over there. I promise you, you'll love it. All right, let's welcome you back. I'm here with my guest, John Waid, and we're talking about the vulture of culture. We've been talking about what that is and what actually holds a culture together. And where I want to go here is that one of the things that John says is that too often companies are being led by people who are claiming to be leaders, but in fact, what they really are is managers, not leaders. Tell us why you believe that, John.
Right. So the reason I believe that is because the promotions are given to people who get results. And people that get results are usually, more in the management realm than they are in the growth realm or in the aspirational realm. And so the bottom line is these people get promoted to the top levels, and usually they are a-holes, and everyone knows they are. So if you need to be a leader, you need people to follow you. And if you're an a-hole, you're going to have less people following you. So it's important to know that as a leader, you have to be aspirational. You have to pay attention to the culture. You have to pay attention to the values, the vision, the purpose of the company, and also the mission, the values, and the behaviors. That's your main responsibility as a leader. As a coach, your main responsibility is to get people to grow. Mm-hmm. And as a manager, your main responsibility is to hold people accountable, to make sure things get done. The combination of leaders, coaches, and managers gives us a very balanced company, just like I talked about balanced values, because we need things to get done. Go ahead.
No, I wanted you to repeat that because I think it's really important. I want people to grasp that.
Right.
So give us the distinctions again, which is this is what a leader is really supposed to be doing. This is what a coach is supposed to be doing. This is what a manager is supposed to be doing. Because I think that oftentimes, I know that as a leader, at a top level, you are likely to have to do all three. That's going to show up. There's no doubt about that. But it's not your main job. Right. But it is important that I think in all three positions, you probably need all three pieces, but there's a dominant, right? And so that's what I want you to share again, because I want people to go, okay, which role am I in as a dominant, even though I do have to do the others?
Right. So the dominant role for a manager is accountability, getting things done, the money. They're responsible for getting things done, the money, and accountability.
So I'm the manager. This is what I've been given to give you to get done. We need it done by this time in this way, and I will hold you accountable to that because I'm the manager / accountability partner for you in this process or whatever it is, this outcome.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Good.
And then the coach is responsible for growth. How do I get you better, stronger, faster? How do we take care of the customer better? How do we, do our business so we grow and get better all the time? So that's the coach.
So as the coach, I'm always looking at and in many ways, as the coach, you might even be seen as a bit of a downer because you're going to be looking for what's not working or what can be done much better. It doesn't mean that you're not applauding people. It doesn't mean that you're not recognizing or validating them, but you are always looking to upgrade whatever it is, whether that's within the individual or in how that they serve.
Right. I often describe the coach as the middle ground between the manager and the leader, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so you'll see coaches on the football field, for instance, either soccer or American football, and you'll see them yelling at the players. Mm-hmm. You'll also see them hugging the players.
Yes.
So that's a middle ground position. And I think that's why coaching became so popular in the last 20, 30 years, is because people were either managers or leaders and you didn't have an in-between. So the coach role became very important. So
Absolutely.
it's a middle ground role. And then the leader is about aspiration, is about, the making sure that you feel good. They're the positive ones. They're the ones that make sure that you fit into the company, you do well in the company. So they're the ones that are always looking at the future.
Right.
Right.
So there's they're holding the future vision. But but to sort of bring it back, you say that there are three things that all leaders must focus on. VIP. Just walk people through that, because I think it's important for people to get it.
Right. So the leader focuses on the employees. The coach focuses on the customers. That's part of the growth part. And, and also the employees. And then the manager focuses on the money.
Right.
So first the money, most companies go in this order. First the money, second the customer, because that's where the money comes from. Third, the employee. If you flip it around and work on the employee and make sure their behavior is immaculate, then they'll treat the customer well. If they treat the customer well, you'll make 5 times more money in the case of Chick-fil-A. So it's no secret that the companies where they treat the customer well and they train you to teach, they hire for it, they train for it, they fire for it, those are the companies that are outperforming all the other companies, and there's no question that it's a culture-driven company that does that. And there's very few of them. So for all your listeners out there, if you're not one of them, be honest with yourself and start to do some work, because if not, it could cost you like Boeing. It could cost you like United.
I mean, this is one of the great challenges is, Enron had all their values on the wall, but weren't living a damn piece of them. And so that's the other part here, John, because leadership, even at a management level, usually involves some ego. And when you have the ego involved, people don't want to admit they're wrong. And if you don't want to admit you're wrong, you can't grow, you can't get better, you can't learn. So that becomes the great challenge. And, one of the things that, you say that you and I agree on is that change requires you to change.
Right.
So again, I get that you're saying if you're not a culture-driven organization, you got to face that. If you're an a-hole leader, you need to face that.
Right.
Yeah, we both know that, but let people putting their hand up and going, "Oh yeah, I kind of suck." That's not so easy.
Well, that's what we specialize in our training. Is if you're an a-hole, we'll tell you. and that's why you pay us big bucks, because we're going to come and tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to help you on how do you work with that, because obviously as a manager you need to be an a-hole sometimes, and with certain people you need to be an a-hole. That doesn't mean that that's a bad trait. It means that you overuse that trait. Yeah. So how do we blend in? Because you said a brilliant thing, which is if you're a leader, you have to do all three. So you first the culture, then the strategies and processes, and then the strategies.
Yeah.
Right? And then for the order switches for the manager, first the strategies, then the processes and systems, and then the people part, right? So it's a little bit switched. They all have to do all three of those. It's just they each have a main role.
Yeah, like I said, there's a dominant position.
There is a dominant position.
Right.
So we confront them. We do what we call positive confrontation. Some of them, will hire us more. Some of them will fire us right away. Yeah. I had some people in a boardroom, and they said, "Why do we have 50% retention issues?" I said, because they don't like you guys. And so they're leaving because they don't like you. And he said, "You're fired." I said, "Okay, have fun."
Yeah, I just did a video training on this very subject. The global research shows that people don't leave jobs; they leave bosses, right? Yes. And those bosses are held in a culture that is not supportive, and so people leave. And if and it's interesting, John. I don't know what you're finding right now, but I know a lot of leaders are feeling like, "Oh, this is actually Corona's pretty good," because the balance in power was in the side of the talent, and now we're hit this massive unemployment thing that talent's going to be more available for me. And my caution is that a lot of leaders think that they're going to be able to start treating people poorly again.
Yeah.
And the thing they've forgotten is, yeah, I get that. There are people who are going to be unemployed, but the last great surge in entrepreneurship was a result of 2008.
Right.
When the economy hit the wall, people went, oh, I can't trust the company, so I'm going to start my own thing. That's going to happen again. We're going to get a massive surge in entrepreneurial people who are working in a gig economy who will say, you know what, I still don't care. I might be officially unemployed, but I am not going to work for you because you're a douchebag. I'm out. Right?
Right.
And so I think that's a really important point.
Right. Well, the worst company is the one where they're douchebags and they don't pay you.
Was that too? Yeah, that is true.
If you're going to be a douchebag, pay me a bunch of money.
Yeah. You got to make it worth my while.
Right.
So leadership is a journey, and you just talked about that in the context of growth and coaching. It's a journey. I believe no one's ever there. It's a perpetual journey. And if you're a decent leader, you understand that, you recognize that, you validate that, and you're always looking to get better no matter what level you think you're at. Right. So talk to us a little bit about your journey, because you have this, it's this, the center of your being is this culture-driven organizations and building that great culture based on 3 dominant values and the behaviors that go along with them. And that's kind of the summary of it. But in my experience, most people who teach, guide, coach are usually teaching, guiding, and coaching because they used to do something terrible. So where have you, and if they didn't do it terribly, they were certainly encountered it terribly. So talk to us a little bit about your journey. Where has been the greatest growth in your personal leadership development?
Right. Well, I had a lot of douchebag managers that I reported to over my career. And when I was in my 20s, one of them came to me and said, I hate you. And I said, well, I hate you too. And then we worked out a package and I left. So for me, he didn't treat the frontline people. He didn't treat me well. So I have always fought for the frontline employee. I've always, a lot of the programs I did at that company were all frontline driven. I brought in consultants to train the frontline in the warehouses and everything else. And some of the people would tell me, John, this is the first time they've ever trained us. I said, it's a shame that companies are paying CEOs millions of dollars and won't spend $1 million to train the people that actually make the money.
Right.
Right. So I get 30 million and I won't spend $1 million to train the people that actually make me the money.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane.
So for me, I grew up in Mexico. There's an awful lot of poverty in Mexico and, a lot of tyrant leaders that have come through Mexico. And for me, we had a nanny growing up and she said to my dad, she said, I hope John one day becomes the president of Mexico because I know he's got a good heart and he'll care about us as people because he cares about me and I don't have anything and he cares about me. He gives me all his stuff. So that's my dream, is that we start treating the people that take care of us, the teachers, the firefighters, all these people, we start treating them fairly because those are the people that actually, they're frontline workers, we're calling them in the States now. And all the rest of us are sitting at home.
Well, I did a video on this and I said, my biggest concern about the end of coronavirus, whenever that might be, in the United States could be about 30 years away, but in the rate that things are going. But I said, one of my great concerns is that the great thing about it is that it's awakened us to the people who keep the wheels on the bus.
Right.
They are the doctors, but they're also the teachers that we used to bitch and moan and complain about until you have to homeschool your own kids while you're trying to get some work done. And then you're like, oh my God, let's pay teachers way more money. Right. But there's the garbage collectors who, if they're not picking up the garbage, we are living in squalor pretty damn fast. The truck drivers who we look down our nose at as a low class job, who will bring our society to a grinding halt within 5 days if we don't recognize them. 5 days. That's it. Society comes to a grinding halt in 5 days. You can't drink your water out of the tap within 7 days if you don't have a truck driver. Right. So people have no concept. So there are all these people who are minimum pay people that we downgrade their work, we downgrade who they are, we downgrade the plumbers, we downgrade all these people, and they keep the wheels on the bus. Right. These are as you say, these are the frontline people. And we give all of our accolades to the CEO who's making $15 million a year for 43 minutes of work a day. That's actually what their productive time is per day, 43 minutes. So there's this is part of the problem. Now, in saying that, I was talking about this how you come up, and I want to address something. I want for people to know a little bit about you, because you lost your mom at a very early age, in your early teens. And in many ways, the vulture of culture came and ate your father at exactly the same time. Tell us a little bit about that, John, because I want people to have an understanding of what it is that's driven you.
Right. So my mom died when I was 12, and she died from hepatitis spurred on, from alcoholism. So, and she was a very people-oriented person. So I absolutely adored her. So did everybody else. My dad was a high-powered executive in Mexico. He was with Pepsi, and he was a businessman and is a businessman. And where my mom had the people skills, my dad had the business skills. He had he was task-oriented and very smart, both on the numbers side and also getting things done. So when I lost my mom, my dad got remarried, and then he sent us all off to boarding school. So for all practical purposes, we lost our dad too. And so I became an adult at 13 when I got dropped off at boarding school, and and have fended for myself ever since. So again, don't forget about your kids. Don't forget about the frontline workers. Don't forget about the people that make your life great. Because it's your kids that you live for. I mean, I have a daughter and I live for her, and I adore her, and I don't want for her what I got.
And you say that the vulture of culture ate your
family with lots of privilege. So it wasn't that. It was the loss of love.
And that's what I'm saying. So you say that the vulture of culture ate your dad. Right. Talk to us about that, because I want people, I want to take this out of the highfalutin philosophical idea of you need a culture-driven organization that has 3 main values, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great show, very interesting. And now I'm back to Monday, right? And I got to get shit done. Right. So this, when you talk about the vulture of culture eating your dad, talk to us a little bit about that, because I want people to get that practicality.
So when you don't pay attention to the human part, the vulture of culture is going to come get you. If it's all about profits, it's all about numbers, it's all about getting things done. And my dad said something to me that stuck with me my whole life. He said, "I'm your parent, not your friend." And he never left that realm. So, I would say that yes, you have to be a parent, and you have to be a friend of your kids too, because there's some point where there's going to be a transition where they don't need the parenting, or they don't want the parenting anymore. So I would advise everybody to pay attention to, yes, the business part. You need to make money, all those types of things. Second, pay attention to growing. And third, pay attention to being a good person and being aspirational, right? Because, we have 3 values in the United States: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we were paying attention to life right now, we wouldn't have the problems that we're having, because we're going straight into liberty and pursuit of happiness without paying attention to life. And this crisis is going to stick around a long time because we're not paying attention to the number one value, which is survival in life. So, and again, great societies have great values. The Roman Empire had 3 values. Utility was their bottom line, or their frontline value. Then they had strength was their growth value. It had to be stronger and get better. And then their aspirational value was beauty. So if you go to Italy, you'll see all these beautiful temples and beautiful churches and everything else. So these great societies, these great empires build everything based on these three balanced values. Not everyone, obviously. I'm just generalizing.
But it's interesting, John, because we know, of course, we are aware the Roman Empire has disappeared.
Right.
Yes, we have beautiful buildings in Italy, but the Roman Empire is gone.
Right.
And I wonder, how they abandoned those three values, or maybe even one of them.
Right.
And when you look at I'm a student of history as well as leadership and psychology. And when you look at the average lifespan of an empire, the US is up for ending as an empire. And it's very interesting to me that, and I'm not saying it's going away, but it's interesting to me that they're abandoning this, particularly right now, the life value. There's a great deal of focus on liberty, but it's been certainly one-sided or not of all people, which is the underlying context.
Right.
And so it's fascinating for me because you grew up not in America, I like what you said. You said you're Mexican born of American parts. I think that's what you said.
Right. Made in Mexico of U.S. parts.
Of U.S. parts, right? So I thought it was pretty cool. You've lived in Brazil, you've lived in Spain, you lived in Mexico, and you are American. You've lived in those other cultures, and we know the problems with each of those cultures in their own separate ways, and that's not the point here. But the point is in understanding about how to come together, and we're so focused on separating right now, and that plays into politics and the false idea. So this is really very much where we started at the beginning, which is these are our values. Yeah. Are you living them? Yeah, we are, in the context of their subjective understanding.
Right.
So I really believe that if you went and asked President Trump, are you living the three top values, life, liberty, and pursuit of freedom? People would say, yeah. He would say, yes. That doesn't mean that I or you would agree with that.
Right.
So this is why I'm talking about this practicality of how do we get people to actually unify on what it means. Now, the Constitution is the unification of what those values mean, but it doesn't change it from people saying, well, this is about this. I'm the law and order president. Yeah, but you seem to be breaking the laws.
Right. So the vulture of culture is circling above the White House right now.
Mm-hmm.
Big time. Like, I wouldn't say one vulture of culture, I'd say thousands of them.
Right.
And the reason being is that the values that we stand for are not being lived right now. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's all about money. It's all about power. It's all about the things, and unfortunately, this virus isn't going to go away when you make more money.
No.
Right. And we're killing a lot of people unnecessarily because money's our driver, right? Just like Boeing, pump out the airplanes,
right.
And lots of people will vote for people like that. And I go,
yep.
Okay, that's great that you have some short-term money. The problem is we don't have life. Mm-hmm. We're losing our liberties because you didn't preserve life. And our pursuit of happiness is out the window right now because we're all at home.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I'm frustrated because I'm a consultant that goes out and gets on airplanes and goes to companies. And I haven't gone to a company in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I blame our president for that.
Right.
And, and hopefully we will be brave enough, even the people that like him, to admit that we're going in the wrong direction and that the values that he stands for are not the values that we care about.
But we're back at that same thing, John, which is, I was asked in an interview recently, do you think that people who voted for Trump will not vote for Trump? And my answer to that was very simple. There are people who won't, who did vote for him, who won't vote for him, and there are a core base who will.
Right.
And who are blinded, who have Stockholm syndrome
Right.
around the whole thing. And they said, well, and I was asked, well, why do you think that is? And I said, the simplicity of it is that human beings have an ego, not me, not you, not them. It's not an us and them. We all have an ego.
Right.
And the number one focus of the ego is survival. And how do we survive? We do what we believe is right based on a previous decision.
Right.
Right. And so the humility to say I made a mistake is a difficult thing for human beings to do.
Yeah.
Great leaders are just masterful at saying, I screwed up, sorry.
Right.
Let me see how I can do it. They're accountable to that.
Those are the
and when you voted a leader who openly says, I've never apologized in my life, I don't intend to apologize, then that's the training for the people who vote in that direction to say, don't apologize for having voted somebody in that you're not agreeing with. And so what happens is people are not willing to let go of that investment in that decision, which maybe privately, secretly, they know is not the best decision.
Right.
And so it becomes an issue of leveraging the ego out of the way.
Right.
To come back to these values. So this is why I'm saying, I think that oftentimes when you've got a culture in the context you're talking about it, you've got a culture with a leader who is leading that company who says, these are the values and I'm obeying them.
Right.
We, the company, the group, have to be big enough, strong enough, large enough to say, yeah, that's your interpretation,
right,
but it's not aligned. And so we got to fire you as CEO of this organization or of this country. We got to fire you the CEO position and install somebody who can align with the true values. So it really is about what you're talking about to such a great degree. Thank you for that.
Oh, no, my pleasure.
So we're coming right to the end of the show here, and I want to ask you a couple of things. One, of course, I want you to tell people where they can find out more about you and all the resources that you have. But before I do that, I always want to ask this one question, which is, can you give us one piece of really solid, practical advice that our listeners, our viewers can go do, put into action, preferably in the next 24 hours?
Okay. I would challenge you to start being more conscious of your behavior. And a simple way to do that is change the word but in your vocabulary to the word and, or cut your sentence. Because if you say, I really love my wife, but
she won't be happy.
Right. Or if you start your performance reviews by, you did a great job this year, but you just ruined a performance review. So, and we're not conscious of our behavior. 88% of our behavior comes from the subconscious. So you can do a small thing and see how difficult it is. Because that but is ingrained in us like crazy, no matter what the language is. And so if you get to where you can cut your sentence or put the word and in there, you will be more conscious of what you're saying, what you're doing, and how you're impacting yourself and others. And I ask that all of you pay more attention to how you're impacting yourself and others in a positive way. And that but is a negative word that disregards. They say everything before the but is bullshit.
Yep, everything before the but is immediately forgotten because the mind is trained to focus on the negative. Right. That's not your mind, my mind. See, even the positive thinker's mind is trained to focus on the negative. Right. So if you say, you're really great, but now I've forgotten everything you said was really great, and now I'm only going to be focused on the negative. So you're absolutely right. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, no, that's...
John, please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, the work you do, and all the resources that you have available for them.
So you can reach me at 3 different places. First, I'll give you my phone number because that's where I would prefer to be reached because I like to talk to people.
Okay. You're a brave man.
Yeah. 1-404-915-3051. That's 1 for the US, 404-915-3051. The second way you can reach me is by text also, if you want to text me.
Right.
You can also reach me at jwaid@corporatecultureconsulting.com. And it's a long one. It's jwaid@corporatecultureconsulting.com. And once you type it in, you don't have to type it in again.
Right. So corporate culture
consulting.com.
That's your website?
That's my website. Well, that's my email, and my website, the abbreviated website is www.c3culture.com. So
c3culture.com.
.com.
Fabulous. Thank you, John. It was a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for all that you've shared. It was a wonderful conversation. I thank you. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. For you, dear listener, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes by going inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go and look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified meaning, or as we call it, finding your dragonfire, is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about whether the vulture of culture is circling above. Because if it is, it's going to eat your lunch. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragonfire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.